That's something for your technicians to sort out on your end, please. But we go live at 10:25.
Good morning and welcome to the viewing and listening audience to the 9th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. This committee has oversight responsibility for education, health, gender, tourism, public administration, labor, culture, community development, and other social services. This is the committee's 4th public hearing with stakeholders pursuant to its inquiry into youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. During our previous public hearings, the committee heard from several government ministries and agencies responsible for developing and executing national labor policy and skills development programs. We most recently heard from youth-led organizations and tertiary institutions on the challenges confronting young persons as they transition from education to the world of work. Today's hearing provides the committee with an opportunity to hear directly from employers and employer representative bodies on the state of the labor market and the factors that influence their recruitment decisions and practices as it relates to the youth population. To assist us with these discussions, we are pleased that the following organizations are appearing before us today. 1, the Tobago House of Assembly, joining us virtually. 2, Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago, HUMAT. And 3, the Employers Consultative Association, the ECA. An invitation was also extended to the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Service Industries, and the Service Commissions Department. However, these organizations were unable to attend due to unforeseen circumstances, but we are thankful for their written submissions. Members of the public are invited to submit their comments on the Parliament's social media platforms, YouTube channel ParlView, or via Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at TT-PARL Committees for real-time updates and highlights from committee meetings. I'd now like to facilitate the introduction of the representatives present, starting with HUMAT, please.
Hi, good morning, Chair, members of the committee, colleagues. My name is Adisya Uri. I am the Assistant Secretary, Assistant Treasurer to the Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and I also serve as the Chair of its Youth and Mentorship Committee.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Joel Ann Cook-Walcott, a member of HUMAT, supporting Khadijah in this regard. Thank you.
The ECA, please.
Good morning, Chair, honorable members. My name is Neil Derrick. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Employers Consultative Association.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nirmal Miraj. I'm the Public Relations and Research Coordinator at the ECA, and I'm supporting Mr. Derrick here this morning.
And okay, could the representatives from the Tobago House of Assembly please introduce yourselves? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and honorable members. I am Denise Toby-Quashie, Chief Administrator of the Tobago House of Assembly, and the other members of the team will introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Elon Mayo. I'm the Director for Manpower and Labor Relations, Office of the Chief Secretary.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Anne-Marie Degazon, Policy Director, Performance Management in the Office of the Chief Secretary.
Pleasant morning, Chair. My name is McKacy-Prince Martin, Director, Youth Development, Youth Department, Division of Youth Empowerment and Sport.
Okay, thank you so much for those introductions. We'd now like, please, our committee members to introduce ourselves. I am Desiree Murray, the chairperson of the committee, and to my left.
Symon de Nobriga, member.
And to my right.
Michael Dowlath, member.
Thank you. I'd also like to introduce our support team. We are ably supported by the Secretary to the committee, Mr. Julian Ogilvie, who's to my immediate left, and Assistant Secretaries, Ms. Lorraine Barraza and Mr. Brian Lucio, who are to my left also, and ably supported by a team of parliamentary research specialists. Now, the inquiry has 3 objectives, and these are: 1, to identify key factors and conditions that are contributing to youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago; 2, to assess the effectiveness of existing state policies, programs, and initiatives in reducing youth unemployment and underemployment rates; and 3, to examine the real and potential contribution of the private sector in facilitating higher labor force participation by young persons. I'd now like to invite the representative or a representative from each organization to bring brief opening remarks, not exceeding 2 minutes, please. Starting with Hermat.
On behalf of the Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Hermat, I thank the committee for this opportunity to contribute meaningfully into the inquiry of youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. As the leading professional body for human resource management in the country, Hermat is uniquely positioned to provide practical, evidence-informed perspectives on human capital challenges and workforce solutions. Through our work with HR practitioners, employers, and strategic partners across sectors, we advocate for policies and practices that strengthen employability, expand access to decent work, and support the development of a resilient, future-ready, and inclusive labor force. Youth unemployment and underemployment are not solely labor market issues, but also national development issues impacting our overall productivity, innovation, social stability, and economic resilience. At Hermat, supporting young professionals isn't simply a tick box, but one of our strategic focus, as evidenced by our recent launch of the Youth Mentorship Program in 2025. We recognize that progress requires coordinated action and not isolated programs, and it is important to measure these outcomes for our youth. We remain committed to working with all stakeholders to address this issue and welcome continued engagement and remain available to provide any additional information required.
Thank you. May I have an opening statement from the Employee Consultative Association? Employers Consultative Association.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We first wish to thank you and the committee for the opportunity to contribute to this important inquiry on youth unemployment and underemployment. We at the ECA views youth employment as a matter of strategic national importance with direct implications for productivity, competitiveness, social stability, and sustainable economic development. It is our belief that youth unemployment in Trinidad and Tobago is not simply a shortage of jobs. Rather, it increasingly reflects challenges related to workforce preparedness, skills mismatches, employability development, and the effectiveness of school-to-work transition systems, which we think is the most important aspect of this conversation. The ECA believes that addressing these challenges requires stronger alignment between education and industry, expanded apprenticeships and internship opportunities, enhanced employability training, improved labor market intelligence, and greater collaboration among government, employers, educational institutions, and social partners. We, as the most representative employer group, stands ready to be active partners in building a more responsive and future-ready workforce development system. Thank you, and we look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Derek. I'd now like to invite the Chief Representative from the Tobago House of Assembly to bring some brief remarks.
Chairman, Senator Desiree Murray, honorable members of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, good morning. On behalf of the Tobago House of Assembly, I wish to express our appreciation to the committee for the invitation to participate in this important inquiry into youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. The Tobago House of Assembly welcomes the opportunity to contribute to this national conversation on an issue that is critical to the future social and economic development of both Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago. Youth underemployment and unemployment are not simply labor market concerns. They are development challenges that affect economic opportunity, social mobility, productivity, inclusion, and the ability of young people to participate meaningfully in shaping their own future and contributing to national development. The Tobago House of Assembly approaches this issue through the lens of its long-term development agenda as articulated in its Strategic Development Planning Pathway 2025 to 2045, which is being implemented commencing this fiscal year. Central to that framework is Development Agenda Priority G, Sustainable and Meaningful Job Creation, which recognizes that Tobago's long-term prosperity depends on building a more diversified, resilient, and productive economy capable of generating sustainable opportunities for its people. The Assembly has therefore embarked on a number of transformational initiatives, institutional reforms, and strategic interventions to support its grand vision towards the greatest little island on the planet. However, we are mindful that structural transformation does not produce immediate results. The full impact of many of these measures is likely to be realized over the next 3 to 5 years as programs mature, institutions strengthen, investments take root, and economic opportunities expand. Madam Chair, again, we thank you. We thank the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today and look forward to a constructive engagement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for those opening remarks. I'd just like to acknowledge the arrival of member David Nakhid. So he will also be posing questions to the representatives. Now, during the committee, I'd like to remind committee members and officials to please direct questions and concerns through the chair. And just a brief house note about the microphones, but I think you all know how to activate them on the devices by pressing the microphone on and off button. And please remember to turn off when you've concluded your contribution. I'll now start the hearing by asking Member Dowlath to pose the first question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, Chair. I want to start with the Tobago House of Assembly. And you spoke about the grand vision and translating it into all of these programs and projects, especially focused on the youth. What we've noticed in the submissions, not just with the THA, but with the others, there is this data collection void, using data for data-driven decision-making in terms of developing programs. And so I noted in your submission, THA, that you coordinate with central government with respect to youth employment especially with the Ministry of Labor. And also in your submissions in Appendix 1, you would have submitted an analysis of Tobago youth labor force data for 2024-2025. When I looked at it, your analysis, you use a very small sample size, and there were some inferences about unemployment rate moving from 4.1% to 1.3% and things like that. That doesn't seem to be very realistic. Could you tell us a little more about your data collection strategies?
At present, the data that we collect comes from CSO. Within the Department of Labor, the data that's collected is holistic data. We depend upon the CSO to get some information from the Division of Youth. But however, that is the basis of our own data collection aspect when it comes to youth in terms of underemployment, employment, and unemployment.
Chair, may I follow up? So what's the last data set that you use? What year is it based on in terms of from CSO and things like that moving forward? Because, you know, as the economy changes, circumstances change, administration changes, things like that.
Right, good morning again. Now, the information that we get from CSO, we get it quarterly. So every quarter, once CSO does their surveys, we would on a quarterly basis, but it's not specific to youth, it's specific to Tobago. What we will ask CSO for is to disaggregate the information that we want. So for example, if we are looking at primarily youth, we will ask CSO for the disaggregated data for youth when it pertains to employment, underemployment, and unemployment.
So that means you don't have any present data that you're using?
No, sir, unfortunately not.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. What we did notice is that the Employers Consultative Association were able to do a snapshot survey of their members and use that to inform their submissions. So I wanted to highlight that that was one of the ways that we could get immediate data accessible to inform decisions. Perhaps the ECA could tell us more about how they went about doing their survey.
While I will let my colleague provide some of the actual data, firstly I want to recognize, acknowledge, the limitations. We only had a small sample, but honestly, because of the time. But I also want to make it very clear that even though we only had a small sample of our membership, we have been doing significant research. So we've had information from NIHS, NTA, and because some of those organizations are tripartite, we have members who serve on those organizations. We've been looking a lot at the OECD structures, which we think, from a structure point, it leads very clearly from age 0 to the transition of work. So those are some readings that we would have actually used to support. But I will have Nirmal provide some information on actually the data collection process itself.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. So if I had to speak about the process, we were, of course, in crafting the survey to go out to our membership, we were, of course, guided by the questions that we were asked to provide a response on. So we sought to kind of build that into the framework of the survey to capture the data. Our survey was administered electronically through our online survey platform, and we sent it out to our membership. Of course, we acknowledge the limitations of a short space of time to get responses, so we kept it open for approximately 2 weeks, and then we decided to close the survey to begin the process of analysis to prepare the response for these questions. So if I had to speak about the structure, that is how we went about going through this process.
Thank you. Well, your survey did indicate that 38.5% of employers experience difficulty recruiting suitably qualified young people despite actively seeking to hire them. Can you confirm the sectors or industries in which these recruitment challenges were most commonly identified?
No, Madam Chair, our survey did not capture sector-specific challenges. In our case, we have data that capture the sizes of the organization, but it would have been a bit more granular to go into sector per se. So that's why I don't believe it is captured here in terms of sectoral difficulties.
But before we move off, what we can say in a general sense is that we see a fair amount of misalignment between the competencies that are required at the work level and some of what is coming out of the graduate institutions. So, and we personally have had experience where we have looked at that in terms of the alignment. What are some of the competencies that are required now from our industries? And what are some of the things that are actually being taught at the schools and the graduation? So there is a fair amount of gap closing that is required on that recruitment. And I think that is leading to another cycle, especially where we see OJTs entering an OJT program and exiting on the next end, and retirees exiting the door and returning in the system, which we think is something that also impacts on the youth unemployment in a general sense.
Member de Nobriga, you wanted to ask about possibly training to address this skills mismatch.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, maybe, well, can I also ask if maybe Hermat can chime in here on the two issues that we raised before we move on?
Thank you, Member Nobriga, Madam Chair, and members. So very much like the ECA, we would poll occasionally to our membership. Our membership, of course, comprises mostly of HR professionals and managers in various organizations across multi-sector environments in both Trinidad and Tobago. And while I'm unable to give very specific information that I think Member Dowlath was requesting, we do have information that does suggest that the unemployment and underemployment are serious issues for employers and our HR management professionals. And as the ECA has already indicated, the misalignment in respect of competency going in versus the requirements and expectations of our employers is an opportunity for us all to explore. Hermat is uniquely positioned to do that. Most of our programs and engagements are to support training and development. That is a large part of what we do. There are other aspects, and I could pass you over to our youth membership and mentorship development officer, who has very specific information that she'd be able to share that specifically is aligned to the youth programs that we're looking at.
Thank you. So the only thing that I would like to add from Joanne is when we launched the Youth and Mentorship Program, we wanted to specifically target young persons between the ages of 18 to 35. As HR professionals, we constantly hear about this gap that exists between persons leaving the school system and entering into the workforce, where they lack specific soft skills, simple things like communication, being able to work in teams, adaptability. So prior to launching, we would have sent a survey to persons who were interested in joining, and we asked them to indicate which areas they were most interested in developing. We had a small sample size, it was around 32, And what was interesting is that most of these persons, they indicated communication and leadership as two of the areas that they wanted to develop. So I think the issue of soft skills in itself, it is something that requires continuous learning, and there must be a bit of a balance between the employers and the employees. And I think even as the young persons, they are aware, okay, this gap exists, but I'm still going to try to do something to meet it. So it's not a complete misalignment between both.
Chair, through you, thank you for that question, for that answer. The programs that HUMAT puts on, these are programs that are geared towards the person looking for a job, or are these sort of train-the-trainer programs? And if maybe I can also ask what role ECA takes in that sort of engagement as well.
Sure. So our programs actually focus on both persons wanting to join the job market, and then we also have persons who are already in the labor force, whether it is they choose to personally come onto a program or their employer puts them onto it. So it's really to help both the technical skills, the industry knowledge, and the development of some of those soft skills.
With respect to the ECA, we have been a little tunnel vision, if you want to say that, but we focus more on the industrial relations / law end. The thing is, we use a number of programs. Only 2 weeks ago, we had our annual review of landmark court judgments. So we structure our programs more to look at areas of weaknesses. We have an institution that provides industrial relations support. We have done some programs in areas like sustainability, business sustainability, but we've looked at very specific areas, and we haven't spread out in terms of a general format because we think that there are a number of institutions that run those programs, and we didn't necessarily want to compete. So we thought that we'd stay within our, and mainly because we are also the official representatives. We are members of the IOE, which is the International Organization of Employers. We also are the tripartite body that speaks at the ILO. So we have a lot of direct involvement with the ILO. And we've been part of the recommendations, the conventions. So a lot of that, that's where we provide most of our training and most of our focus.
Chair, I think your description, Vice Chair, is not that you're tunnel vision. I think you understand your role and function. So I'm fine with that understanding of it. Can I, Chairman, through you, ask the same of the THA and their role and function in terms of training, both training the trainer and training persons who want to enter the workforce?
Take it. Pleasant day, Chairman, through you. Now, we receive a lot of information, feedback from our evaluations and stakeholders, especially as it relates to some of the programs that we do. And I'd like to name a few of the programs. We have the World of Work program. We have the Youth Energized to Success program. And when we get this feedback, this qualitative feedback, we have realized that there is a need for training and development as it relates to the soft skills, namely communication skills, teamwork, leadership, punctuality, that kind of thing. Now, we are aware of it, and we use this information when we design future courses. All of our training programs start with a capacity development session. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a few days. And in this capacity development session, we expose our interns to the skills and the trainings and the subjects that they would need to survive, to maneuver the workplace. Not just the technical skills, but the soft skills especially. So to end, Chairman, we've noted the issue and we're taking strategies, we're implementing strategies to address same. Thank you.
Member Ameen had a question.
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to ask the agencies, while I know of your World of Work and other programs where you prepare persons who are preparing themselves for the workplace, very often institutions have orientation, employee orientation, where they will have training with employees to prepare them for their particular work environment, the culture in that organization, impart to them what is expected of them in the performance of their duties. And there is an opportunity there for some of that training to be imparted. Do you collaborate with employers in that manner to be part of some of their standard orientation? Many times organizations take in workers, employees for a particular program en masse, and their training and orientation sometimes lasts for several days, a week, and some of them are extended even for months. So there is an opportunity there for some of this training, particularly in leadership and communication, to be tailor-made for a particular organization and to further empower the trainees, the new employees, and in that opportunity. Have you considered or do you participate in that type of training with organizations? Is it available to employers for training their employees?
Member Ameen, thank you for the opportunity. Chair. So HUMAT specifically works with HR professionals mostly and organizations that they represent. We have found that most of the organizations that we represent do have onboarding programs and orientation programs. And they do sufficiently cover a wide aspect of information that would be useful to any entrant, whether it is a youth entrant or a professional. However, in respect of some of the youth initiatives that our organizations are involved with, like the on-the-job training programs and such programming, we do have information that suggests that there are orientation programs. Some members do choose to advance that orientation program and give very specific soft skills training as to which you're referring to, like leadership and communication, and that is really based on their own very specific needs. So you do have organizations that, in addition to having their orientation programs, which cover the normal entrant level type of information that any employee would need, would also consider additional training. And I know of many organizations that do that. And HUMAT continues to provide, like, for instance, recruitment and onboarding practices to its membership through its professional training, and persons can avail themselves to those kinds of training programs. However, in respect of like some of the youth initiatives like YTAP and the on-the-job training program, we don't really have our tentacles in there. Of course, if any of those organizations approach us and would like to partner with us and would like our assistance, we'd be only too happy to support. But we really do rely on our member organizations and the professionals that we work with to extend that type of training and support. I hope that answers from HUMAT.
From the ECA point of view, Member Ameen, the simple answer is no. We don't. It clearly is not our focus. We are very focused. Our research is around what impacts our employers. We see ourselves as a representative arm. We look at things like changes in the law. We look at areas, so we continue to review things like judgments. And we align our training specifically for our members. And we may have discussions on forum areas for where things might be affecting, because we are the ones that are supposed to have conversations with the tripartite, with the government, and also with the worker bodies. So that's really where our focus is. As I said, we have actually created an institution. So we have an institution that does industrial relations training and law training in terms of law practice. So we make sure that the industrial relations officers for the representative companies are prepared to be able to, and not just from a point of defense, but also from a point of avoidance in terms of practices, making sure that they address issues like policies and stuff that looks at avoidance. That's where our focus has been, and we're also limited in numbers and limited in resources. So we've not stretched ourselves outside our mandate.
Part of the internship experience, a key focus is onboarding the expertise of both private sector and public sector professionals in the orientation process. Orientation takes place usually over a 1-week period. And apart from delivering sessions to young persons in the various areas, communication, conflict resolution, how they dress and prepare for work, and several other areas. We also expose participants to real-life interview settings where some of the very private sector agencies and public sector professionals assist them in doing simulation exercises and then provide them with relevant feedback so that they can improve not only their sector-specific information in their areas of interest, but in general, their life skills and their conduct within the workplace.
Thank you for those answers. I just have 2 follow-up questions. I'll deal with the last answer first. The young people recognize the value of government initiatives in identifying candidates with long-term potential. However, Humat says that the effectiveness can be strengthened through sustained support, stronger alignment with industry needs, and clearer pathways to permanent employment. So my question is, what mechanisms or policy changes would you recommend to create clearer pathways from government internship and training programs to permanent employment for young people? And to what extent do government internship and training programs meet industry needs, which require stronger alignment and then can translate into longer-term employment? And anybody can take that question, probably Humat and the THA. And a follow-up also, I wanted to ask Humat about, you said that there's a lot of onboarding and training in soft skills, but your submission said that employers may be discouraged from hiring or investing in young workers due to perceived inexperience and the costs that are associated with onboarding and training. So what are the main employee retention concerns that discourage employers from investing in young workers, and what strategies can help to improve the effectiveness in improving retention? So it's 2 follow-up questions. One is transition to permanent employment, and one is how can we encourage more private sector organizations to invest in the training? Thank you.
Through you, I want to take the first question because it's one of the areas that we have grappled with over the years in doing the internship, our World of Work in particular, which has been running close to 20 years now. And our experience, we have kept our private sector organizations pretty close because apart from the in-house orientation sessions, the program model supports placement in sector-specific areas for our young persons. And there is always attached to it a post-evaluation to understand what are the needs of the employers. We have seen a growing trend towards needing more persons who are skill-based within the sector, and as such that led us to developing another internship which has been running for about 3 cycles now, which we call Trade Trek, which was more specific in providing our young persons with the skills required by the specific sectors. And so they are placed in their areas of interest. We started in cycle 1 and 2. We were running the program for 2 months, which based on our consultation and feedback from the employers is that they wanted to have a longer periods with the trainees to ensure that there is that transfer of knowledge and then putting them in a position where it's much easier for them to gain sustainable employment. So for this cycle, we are extending the program for a 4-month period, but that limitation is really based on our available resources to take it for a longer period, which in our estimation and consultations with the employers, it should be a minimum of 6 months, which would provide them with the soft and the introductory hard skills exposure that they need so that they can be easily have greater uptake within the area. So those are the areas that we are exploring now. So there's great value in both matching where the aspirations of the young persons are with the industry need. And we do recognize this as an area for more research, more collaboration, more involvement of our young persons in determining where their career paths go.
Madam Chair and members, thank you. Just to start with, I think the first of the questions, which is really what are some of the initiatives that employers are considering in respect of making sure that the youth that they do employ have the competencies and the skills required to deliver. In respect of that particular question, what we could say is that there are employers at different levels of the spectrum, right? We do have employers, of course, with their resource base are able to do more than others. So, for instance, we do have employers who run their own youth initiative programs, separate and apart from what is offered through the government of Trinidad and Tobago. They would support internships and apprenticeships, and they largely format and structure those programs. Those are very few, to be honest with you, among the employer community. And we do have employers as well who take advantage of the government-run programs, youth-based programs, and find it useful in terms of augmenting their own workforce. Those employers from time to time will look forward to bringing on the job trainees, aligning themselves with YTAP and the programs that they offer in terms of supporting some of the technical training programs, and they routinely bring persons into the workforce through those programs. The disconnect that you were asking us to respond on is the pathway between that training opportunity and actual employment. And that is something that is largely controlled by the employer. And I imagine that the answer to that is really one that is based on their own economics and opportunities and so on. I think that's the opportunity that all of us can look at in terms of how can we make the environment perhaps one where employers find an easier pathway from the training aspect and the training youth initiatives that we do have and they do access to actual employment. And we have found in our limited research that we've done that there are some opportunities that are available, but not quite as much as we do have of course, youth entrants and persons on the market. So that's one. In terms of HERMAT and our focus, very much unlike the ECA, our focus really is for professional training and development and support to HR professionals and employers. So in that regard, we have continuously offered training in respect of HR practices and techniques that we endorse for all employers to follow, which will naturally lead to a better work environment, better training and development opportunities. So we would certainly support apprenticeship programs, internship programs, which would offer youth and other employees an opportunity to scale up and an opportunity to be developed, and in so doing, to find opportunities within the employment of the organizations that they're attached to. I can pass you on to Khadijah, who could speak specifically about the Youth Mentorship Program, which we actually felt was needed to also respond to some of those opportunities in the youth sector. I don't know if we could talk a little bit about that.
But before you do, yes, sure. I would like to hear her views. Are any of HUMAT's efforts directed towards HR professionals to be more adaptive to the behavioral traits and practices of the younger generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha? Yes. Because the feedback we got from the previous inquiry was that the youth felt that a lot of the onus was on them to adapt.
Thank you. Yes. The answer to that is yes. We do have programming that focuses on the multi-generational workplace. It comes up in our strategies when we share them with employers and with HR professionals in respect of recruitment, but also in respect of engagement, because as you know, that too is an issue in terms of communicating and offering a workplace that is attractive to our youth, because we do have instances where people voluntarily leave the employment situation because they just feel ignored, or they feel that they're under threat in some way. And so we do address those kinds of issues in our engagement, recruitment practices, and we do run professional programming that actually addresses the multi-generational workplace. Of course, we encourage the employers to send their managers and supervisors to also receive some of that training, and to the extent that people do that, they will have that kind of understanding and benefit from it. But of course, we are limited in terms of the reach in respect of employers actually taking that call for people to be trained accordingly.
Can you identify the universities, the technical institutes, and the training providers
that offer multi-generational training?
Correct.
What I could say is that our professional programs, so for instance, we run a program that is internationally accredited through the Society for Human Resource Management Professionals, which is a US-based organization but offers international accreditation. And through that programming, it is one of the topics that is consistently offered in respect of how do we engage persons of the multi-generations, how do we train for it, etc. In our own local programming, from time to time, we do have programming that we offer our local professionals, either remotely or in class training, that will speak to some of the challenges of the multi-generational workplace and specifically address that. But as I said, we're limited in terms of the persons who are interested and attend those programs versus, all employers making themselves available to have that understanding. Locally, there are other providers, private providers that do that from time to time. I think Roytech, the Arthur Lockjack, for instance, would offer those kinds of programming. But other than that, I can't say specifically to the universities, educational offerings specifically to address how young persons can equip themselves and endear themselves to a workplace that is multi-generational.
Thank you, Chair. To Humat, what is the uptake from your membership to engage in training like that? And I'm asking that from the perspective of retention. From your response, it seems as if the focus is on getting, as the Chair said, the committee's previous findings, getting this generation to adapt to, I suppose, what they would consider an antiquated work environment. And in many ways, I suppose the question then is, what is being done to equip the employers, and what is the uptake from the employers to, I don't want to say adapt, but to be more accommodating of generations who may communicate in different ways, but also to get an understanding both ways in terms of expectations around work ethic.
Before you answer, and just to add to that, and remember the youth coming into the job market now experienced COVID while they were in education. So a lot of those social skills that you develop in the school space, the school environment, they didn't have that opportunity. So employers need to be cognizant of the fact that this is the post-COVID generation as well. So just take that into consideration when you're answering. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Nobriga and Madam Chair. So the truth is that our programming has had an opportunity to address those issues. As I said before, through our onboarding programs and through our professional programs, the extent to which employers take that offering and implement into their own programming, into their own policies, we haven't directly researched that, but just from understanding some of the member organizations that are part of HUMAT, we do have a number of organizations that have introduced and adapted policies that speak to youth involvement, that speak directly to engagement at that level. So, for instance, I know that there was a time when, of course, cell phones were banned, right? For good reason, but I think employers have moved away cautiously from that initial draconian, what would be seen as draconian perspective, and have since introduced policies that suggest, okay, while you can use your devices for very specific things and in specific ways, there are regulations regarding how you access data and confidentiality and so on. So for instance, in our engagement strategies that we suggest to employers, we do have employers that understand that there must be a process, a routine process for persons to surface issues and so on, and that happens from time to time. But unfortunately, HUMAT would not be able to respond in a way that says, okay, 50% of the employers that we work with do X, Y, and Z. But I could tell you that some of the employers have put in place meaningful policies, meaningful strategies to have engagement and to also be, I think, youth-friendly in their workplace. If you go into some of the banks, you would see a very casual appearance, not just in some of the banks, in some of the employment organizations, because there's an understanding that, this traditional way of dressing is not necessarily one that is youth-friendly and engages the generational Zs that are coming into the workplace now. So there are some movement. There's more, I am sure, that can be had. And as I said before, HUMAT would be willing to work with any entity to advance that in any railway. So I hope that addresses some of the concerns that you've raised.
Thank you, Member Nakhid.
A lot of these sociological studies show that this generation, one of their qualities or attributes is impatience, short attention span, all of that. In all of these programs you're hearing about from you all and from the THA, are stipends being paid? Stipends are being paid where the youths, they can be engaged with that? And what kind of stipends? Is it a livable stipend?
Yes, Chairman. Yes,
Before is it livable? Is it a livable stipend? Is it what kind of stipend? I mean,
of work program, stipends are based in the vicinity of about $3,000 per month for trainees. Usually the program goes for a 2-month period during our vacation period. For other internships across the THA, because we do offer internships for returning or students who are tertiary level studies, and the stipends are relatively equitable, but what is being paid across the board. That our young persons have, particularly for a recently introduced Trade Trek program, where the target population is youth in at-risk situations or vulnerable situations in Tobago. And so we pay particular attention, not only in the stipends that we provide, but in also other support that we provide to them in ensuring that they can show up and follow through on their training.
Fine. I answer you, Honorable Minister. I think we have to look a little bit at this from a structural point. For us at the ECA, we have been involved in a number of things. We've been, in 2023, we were at the ILC, and recommendation 208 on quality apprenticeships would have been formalized as a recommendation. We would have participated only recently with the NTA, who started their rollout, and we would have provided our own comments and support. In terms of the structure, there is an OJT structure that has 4 levels and 4 levels of stipend that already exists. And I think we have to look at where we are, because I think historically, they were very well-developed apprenticeship systems. If you go back to the Shells, the Texacos, Tesoros, right, for instance. I would have worked at Tesoro. And we had 4, I started in Tesoro just before they left, right? And I would have worked across the thing. We had 4 apprenticeship, 5 sets of apprentices. So we had young women who had O levels, who came in, spent about 18 months, who were taught to walk in high heels. They had to put a book on their head and walk in high heels. We had a crash apprenticeship group that went through training to become our assistant craftsmen. We had craft apprentices who became the craftsmen. We had student apprentices who became the supervisors, and we had graduates who became our professionals, all in time to fill the succession program. We've moved to this at a national level. And I think what has to start happening is, how do we create now national systems for things like that? And these, because we speak to this in a number of ways, and I think we forgot what it is for. But really it is about the school to work transition. And we have to look at that from a competence point, that there's a knowledge part of this that is provided by the schools, and there is a skill part that is provided by industry, right? To be able to get, well, the 3 aspects of competence. There's skill, knowledge, and attitude, all right? And what we've seen is a falling of the attitude. But obviously, there are contracts, and I think that there are many youths, although we say they have short span, that work very long hours because they love the jobs that they have, right? And nobody has to tell them what to do. So I think some of these things that we're speaking of, we've seen that, and I don't think that it has changed so fundamental. But I think we have to go back maybe to the drawing board and start looking at this. Take the OECD, for instance. This is a very clear program. You're between 0 and 3 in an ECCE, learning how to associate. You're between 3 and 5 in an ECCE, learning basic numeracy and literacy. You're between 5 and 12 in a primary school. You're between 12 and 15 at the first level secondary school using general, right? Which we have in a general sense, and then we have some fallout. How do we create this recursive system that where there are fallouts, how do they come back? And we have some systems that now provide certificates to some students at an age where they can't walk into a job. And that certificate may not provide them continuance in another system, right? And that might well create a good recruitment pool for the gangs. You know, we talk about the gangs and the recruitment. And I think really and truly, part of this exercise is that the social employers, the social groups, the government, has to take this whole issue of school to work transition as an issue and remap it, understand where the fallouts are. So if a child didn't do well at SEA, where do they go? And if they're a slow learner and they come back into the system, how do they get back into the system to continue school? How do we create that as a bridge? All right. Before we start, I mean, yes, we can provide all that training, but that is really for a lot of people who have already made it through the system. And I don't think that that's where the group that we're talking about in terms of youth fallout, right? Because the systems exist, the OJT system exists, the apprenticeship system exists. We've been in all these consultations. But do they work? Do they work the way we want them to work, which is what we think needs to be addressed?
Thank you, Mr. Derek. Yeah, we did examine that issue in another inquiry, but you raise an important point. Your submission said that greater attention should be given to youth disconnection from employment, education, and training systems. So there's this youth group called the NEET who are not in employment, education, or training. So based on your research, what are the primary factors contributing to youth becoming disconnected from education, employment, and training? And could it be related to residing in rural communities or lack of access to the internet or digital platforms? So if you could answer that, and also the Tobago House of Assembly, because the Tobago Youth Council definitely raised internet connectivity as a potential issue for remote work and flexible work. Thank you.
And I'm happy that you raised that, because sometimes we create these systems and we think that they're working. So I had a conversation with a young man during COVID, and we had made contributions to some schools, and he had a device, and he said, well, I have a device, but I can't afford net. It's a good friend I have. I actually go by their gate and stand up with the device, right? And he has given me the password, right? We can't tell the parents. So, yes, sometimes we think that will work, but we haven't looked at all the pieces. We look at simple things like some children we've seen, the single parent home, not because they can't do well, they just didn't go to school every day as they should have. But what happens, but the thing is, the corrective systems, which is what we're saying, that group, many social things may lead to them falling out. But when they do, how do our systems provide that system for the recreation? Because if we think about it as a level that says we have craftsmen, assistant craftsmen, we should be thinking of these persons for each institution. We should be very clear what the pathway is. That says, if you come from here and you graduate, what is the pathway? So yes, we have OJT at that level, but what does it cater for? So does it cater for an assistant craftsman? And in that case, could you be an assistant craftsman to a mason, to a plumber, right? And could we the government give a stipend to them, right? And they become part of that. So at least there is that whole, there is that whole issue of transition. So we provide that space for the transition, which I think is what we are saying from an employer's point. Because yes, the employers don't have an issue. As I said, we would have done significant work in Geneva and the ILC with the recommendations. We started back conversations. We think that could lead to a very clear structure for apprenticeships. But the apprenticeships, as a recommendation, is focused more on a certain group. It's focused on trades. But there are other areas that we could tripartite, sit down and talk about in our own system how we could refashion that. So as you see, we've not been too much into that training, but we've been looking at the legislation and the system that we think that needs to drive this whole, because our members as employers benefit. We are happy to have young people who are ready for work. And if we could afford it, yes, we're ready to be able to train them and make them ready for work. But they have to also come ready. So as nobody out there is waiting in a manufacturing sense. AI is picking up at a speed. So if the infrastructure is not there as a manufacturer and you're already behind, how do you take somebody to train? And that's simply what we're about. So yes, we're working with that. We were part of a consultation, again in Geneva just recently, from a technical point, in manufacturing and AI. And we're looking at where the world is going with respect to that. But as we go forward, there has to also be that whole issue of infrastructure. And that's why we sit on all these committees. We sit on the TVET Research Committee. We sit on the CXC Committee, because we're saying that there must be some kind of influence. The curriculum, is it following? So we don't think that is a small problem. We think it is something that has to be, by committee, we have to sit down and take a specific look at that group, because, I mean, I was on my way, I was listening to the radio, and the English report speaks to it, because it speaks to the recruitment of those youths. So if we don't provide a system for them, somebody else is going to recruit them, right? And it is going to cost us 3 times what it costs us to train them.
Thank you.
Or more.
Thank you. Did the THA want to comment on the infrastructure issue and the youth who are not engaged in education, employment, or training?
Yes, Chair. Through you, we want to express that that is a recognized issue that we have had over the years. And so the Tobago House of Assembly has approached that by providing within our youth centers and some of our community spaces, in particular our community centers as well, to some extent making Wi-Fi and other things available for our young persons. We do go the extra mile to ensure that when they are participating in our program, that those digital access means are provided for them, because it is an area of concern. We are not there fully as yet in terms of providing the infrastructure support, but it's something that we have onboarded, and we will certainly be looking to expanding that reach. Of course, our resource limitations are always evident in us being able to do so. But I want to also speak to some of the barriers being of course, the economics of going to work, especially for young persons starting their first jobs. We have seen it even in their participation at our internship programs. Persons who may not have clothing, and those are the things that our stipends are meant to address. But it also serves as a limiting factor for some persons participating. The issues that have been raised to us as well in relation to the minimum wage, while the increase in the wage, it seems to be a good thing for our young persons, what we have seen is that, or comments by our young persons have shown that employers are balancing that off by sometimes reducing the number of hours that they work in the week. So we are finding young persons who are not able to be employed through an entire work week, but they may get 2-3 days a week, which compounds an issue for them in being able to sustain themselves and provide for means of getting to work and so on. So I want to join with our colleagues there in saying that it is a critical area that needs to be examined, so that from both the employer's perspective and the employee employee, and in this case, our young persons who are seeking to be more engaged in the economic sectors.
Thank you. I think we had a follow-up question from Member Dowlath and then Member de Nobriga.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. All three organizations would have spoken about mismatch of skills, moving from the school system into employment. I've looked at the THA, you've spoken about the World of Work programs, the YES program. Is there any kind of tracer studies, tracking of our graduates? Because Mr. Derek came up with a nice phrase there about rematching, you know, doing the remedial work. So when you do those tracer studies, you pick up those mismatches, and therefore now it would be able to illuminate what Member de Nobriga asked about, all of these training programs. And I think THA mentioned the World of Work program has been around for a long time. And Matt spoke about some of their training programs. ECA would have been involved in a lot of these organizations that are involved in training. I think it's really important for us to have these, to follow the graduates as they go in and to get the kind of authentic data that will come back, as Mr. Derek said, and rematch them now to the actual world of work. So I want to ask all three organizations in terms of, if you don't have it, the tracer studies, if it's something that you think is really important, and if it's important, how you'll implement it within your organization. Thank you, Chair.
Between 2003 and 2005, the Tobago House of Assembly, through its department, in fact, it was a collaboration between the Department of Youth Development and our then Policy and Research Development Institute. We, in fact, initiated and piloted a tracer study where we collected samples, in fact, not samples, we collected data from the entire population of youth who were in secondary schools in 4th form and lower 6th, with the very intent of initiating a tracer study for the very reasons that you are saying. And so our instruments then collected data on their aspirations with the intent of tracking so that we can match with the skills and the labor market and other studies that were happening around that time. However, over the years, it fell off, but we do see the relevance of reinitiating things like that, and we expect in the near future we should be incorporating it, especially to track some of the real-life experiences of our young persons, which also can be shared as motivating factors for persons participating in this bridging kind of program that we have. We do also see the need of having these initiatives more integrated into our secondary school level so that there really is a so that we are more data informed about the approach to doing that, and then we can implement those kind of tracking and tracer mechanisms.
Member Dowlath, thank you for the opportunity. Through the chair, just to say that, you know, HR professionals really value feedback, and that is implicit in all of the programming that we do at HUMAT. And it's also one of the things that the organizations that our members are part of, they consistently engage youth employees as well as persons who are connected to the apprenticeship and the training programs, right? Particularly the government-run programs. Feedback is a normal ongoing part and mechanism of what they do. And based on the feedback, they would alter, change, implement, design appropriate mechanisms to address some of the concerns that are raised. So we don't have a formal research machinery into that specific aspect. We do research around like HR policies and some other things, but not specifically for the youth unemployment and underemployment question that we're looking at today. If I kind of just want to also raise, just cheating a little bit in terms of the question that was raised before, just to introduce another concern, a barrier that we have found, because work ethics is what we deal with all the time at HUMAT. And yes, we know of some of the issues. I have to say we are thankful that the Ministry of Education is routinely asking people to send their children to school at carnival time and Ash Wednesday, because that shows up in the workplace later on. People, in terms of punctuality and attendance, those are big issues at a national level that I think we all have to address. But also we have neurodiversity issues that are coming into the workplace that we find our members and employers seriously grappling with. So I endorse what was said before in terms of technology being a barrier, economics, of course, being a barrier, but neurodiversity is showing up more and more among our employment entrants, as well as showing up in terms of our youth entrants as undiagnosed issues, sometimes diagnosed issues that have not been treated, and there really aren't formal mechanisms to treat with that, either at the school level or certainly otherwise. And employers find themselves all the time grappling with that. So if I can just introduce that as another consideration for the committee to take on and advance.
Honourable Minister, no, we haven't done tracer studies, but we have been liaising with the Ministry of Labour, the OJT, because we do keep some track of, or attempt to keep some track of trained persons. And we think that we're happy that you raised that issue, because I think what we track in terms of what we measure is extremely important. And I'm not sure that we actually have created systems to measure that, which is so that we actually tell the true benefit of these programs. Because while I think that the programs are great programs, whether it is providing the benefits that we require, we are not in a position, I think, that where we will actually launch such a tracer study. But we do welcome it, because we would like to know how much people have different skill sets coming from other organizations, especially when you have things like expatriate companies coming, when there are challenges. Many say that there are no qualified persons in Trinidad. How much of that record we keep, exactly what do they do in those programs, and how do you actually measure those competencies? How do you certify them? I think those are really issues that are coming up now. So I think that the tracer study is an important aspect. We do provide 100% support for it, but it's not something that we could do, or we have done.
Thank you for that. So we will, as a committee, hopefully be following up on to get some of the results of the tracer studies from the THA and others. And I want to thank Ms. Walcott for raising the neurodiversity issue. And I suspect that a large proportion of the NEET youth are neurodiverse as well. So I'm sure that's an issue, and maybe that could be incorporated into the training of the employers, how to deal with neurodiversity in the workplace. So thank you for that. I think Member Ratiram had a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And Chair, I would like to direct my question at the THA with respect to the submissions at the last public hearing. The Tobago Youth Council indicated that Tobago's economy remains heavily dependent on tourism and public sector employment, thereby constraining the availability of sustainable employment opportunities for young people. Now, in the submissions on the Strategic Development Planning Partnership Framework 2025 to 2045, the the submissions indicate that they are prioritizing employment generation in emerging sectors, including agribusiness and agro-processing, which really stood out to me, and I was happy to see that they are focusing in the area of agribusiness and agro-processing, and also renewable energy and green technologies, digital economy and ICT services, cultural and creative industries, sustainable fisheries and blue economy industries, and climate resilience and sustainable infrastructure development. I would really like to know, like, what specific program, investment, or policy initiative have been implemented or are planned to be implemented to create employment opportunities for young people in the listed priority sectors, and what are the anticipated timelines for these implementation?
You are quite, in terms of the reference to the direction of the strategic development planning pathway, as indicated in our opening statement, this year is in fact the commencement of our implementation in those areas. So what is actually happening right now on the ground is that the various divisions with responsibility, because that list cuts across several divisions of the THA, who are now involved in detailing the strategies that will be rolled out and implemented for our next fiscal period. The THA also recently would have presented its budget priorities, which will be aligned with those various sectors. Given the range and the reach of the program that we do, it may best serve us if we are allowed to present maybe further details at follow-up conversations, given that we are now at the commencement of the implementation period.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to compliment the folks on the THA for the visionary leadership that the THA is really providing, especially for the young people in Tobago, and also as you providing that information and coming forward to also take into consideration the measures that are to be taken for that these young people to develop the required skills and qualification to access the employment opportunities in these emerging sectors.
Received. I will say though that the Tobago House of Assembly, we have recognized some of our deficits in the research area, and our focus now is to ensure that we are much more data driven and results oriented in alignment with our development agenda priorities. And so that transition into a more results-based approach is one that divisions are now working on in strengthening their capacities, to the extent that we, for the remainder of this fiscal and into the early part of next fiscal, you should see divisions better prepared to onboard their research studies in very specific areas so that we can obtain the baselines we need and be more measured in our program deliverables.
And I would just like to conclude, Chair, by expressing that the Ministry of Agriculture, through our National Agriculture Training Initiative program, stands ready to provide support to the folks at THA with respect to the agribusiness and the agro-processing courses and opportunities. We stand ready to provide that support, so we ask you to please feel free to engage our Permanent Secretary at the Ministry, and we are there to provide you all with that support as well.
Thank you very much. That will be well received.
Great, so thank you. So we see that there'll be emphasis on the green, the yellow, and the blue economy. Thank you. I think Member de Nobriga had a follow-up question.
Yes, Chair. Well, follow-up in terms of a general follow-up. Chair, there are a few things that have been said here today that I just want to sort of drill down a little bit on. We did talk about employer-led training programs. I think Matt did speak about that. I have not gotten a sense of how prevalent that is amongst the organizations that form your membership, or the persons who work in organizations that HOME membership and to get an understanding of exactly what is the quantum in terms of from the private sector, companies that are engaging in employer-led training programs. We have discussed at length government Big G-led programs like the OJT, YTEP, and we have to acknowledge that whether it is policy-driven decisions that may shift focus, whether there are financial implications that may result in just the extent to which these programs can be implemented. There are influences from the public sector side that will impact the deliverables of those programs. I want to get a sense from especially the attendees who are in person here. Is the private sector doing enough through their corporate social responsibilities to look at youth engagement, whether that be sector-wide or community-focused? Are they doing enough, or is there still an over-reliance on government, Big G, driven programs of this nature? And I say that as well because Mr. Derek also in his opening did speak about you have a lot of young people who are coming in through programs like the OJT, get to the end of a 2-year cycle and come out. And then you have retirees who are leaving and then being brought back in. So my question is really driven by one, building the pool that at the end of the day is going to impact private sector as well as public sector, but also creating a future employee that can be retained as opposed to having their cost covered for 2 years and then you just start a new cycle with another employee.
Thank you, Member Nobriga and Madam Chair. Through you, just to say that HUMAT is a big proponent for development in all regards. In fact, one of the requirements for our professionals and our members is that they have to engage in continuous learning. It is a requirement as a professional. That said, of course, professionals are in organizations, and to the extent that they can influence the type of development budget that an HR professional would like to have and the extent to which it actually takes place, there's a disconnect, I would say, being an HR professional myself. So we certainly can't speak to the quantum of what employers may be spending on development, so unfortunately I won't be able to speak to that. I think private sector would say that they are doing some things, but I also think that there are areas that they can improve on. I think the employers do depend on the government-funded apprenticeship, youth employment programs. They have found value in it. I think they agree that there is value in partnering with those programs and seeing it as part of their CSR, but also seeing it as part of a route within which they can consider new entrants. So there is value, I think, in that regard. But unfortunately, I won't be able to speak in respect of the actual statistics around how many employees actively engage youth and fund youth initiatives in their CSR. That's not our focus. But we do know of organizations that actively engage in those kinds of programs.
No, within Tobago, the private sector within Tobago is very limited. And a lot of them depend upon the Tobago House of Assembly to facilitate a lot of their training for their private sector. For example, our tourism industry, our supermarket industry across here, come to the Tobago House of Assembly for specific training, whether it be in customer service, business writing, communications, leadership, in basic terms and conditions of work, knowing your rights. So they are heavily reliant on us for that level of training, and we facilitate where we can. The focus is general, although at the training sessions, you do find a higher degree of young persons coming to the training.
Thank you. And Mr. Derek, you wanted to add something?
Yes, no, I wanted to answer with a very interesting question. But before we even answer, I want to just give some stats. About between 26 and 50%, let's just say 37% of our members says that 50% of their workforce is within 18 to 35. So yes, there is a high, the recruitment of young persons. But we have to look at that from a structure point, because in terms of our membership are some of the larger organizations who depend on that. But a large part of is the informal workforce, which is really where you have small companies, MSMEs. You know. So some of them join only when they want support, all right? And I think that's where the real issue is, because that's the group who really need more of that support, who can't fund it, right? So the larger companies, yes, they have structured training programs, they have their succession plans, they have developmental programs going on. But I think, so it's not a very easy question to answer, because I can answer for our membership, but it still doesn't answer for the employers, because such a large portion of the employers fall into the informal workforce that you don't even have all the statistics on in terms of reporting. So I think a lot of it has to be done.
But Mr. Derek, would you agree, though, that that sort of investment from the persons, the groups that form your organization, even if we agree anecdotally, there would be a knock-on effect to the MSMEs if there is investment in terms of lifting the pool. 100% of that pool is not going to get employed by the larger organizations. Some of them may become SMEs themselves or be engaged. So it was based, that is maybe the basis for the question.
And if I just add, a lot of the large organizations take that as an approach too, because many of them are supported by a lot of contracts and contractors. So persons who possibly not recruited come back and provide services elsewhere, from another angle, still provide services to them because they still depend on some of the services coming from the contracted workforce. So it is really a very complex, and I think we have to look at, that's why, again, I'm saying that we have to look at all the pieces. If I can just add one little thing, which I think, as part of that structural issue, the issue of PLAR, Prior Learning Assessment and Recognition, right? I mean, while the PL and A seem to be okay from the NTA, right? The R, because we talk about the CVQs, but how does the R, right, get into the CVQs? So how do we take a young person who has been working all the time with a mason or a welder, who could actually weld? What do you give them? And how do they take that back to the institutions? Like, how do I take that back to NESC and get an exemption from the practicals and just have to do maybe maths and science to get my certificate? Because that, to do a recommendation for the transfer becomes a difficult issue. So even as so some of those things I think are issues that we have to deal with when we start talking about the transition. I don't know if you want to add anything on.
Sure. Madam Chair, just to add some a bit more context and to support what Mr. Derek is saying, when we think of the private sector, we always have to be mindful that we don't consider it to be a monolithic entity, right? Yes, there are large organizations, and yes, these large organizations have the capacity to support what we're speaking about. But when the bulk of the economy comprises of MSMEs, we also have to acknowledge that sometimes these organizations, when they need support, either for securing finances, which then feeds into their operations, which then feeds into how many people they can employ, they have to turn towards the government policy. We at the ECA, we did a joint study with the ILO about 2 or 3 years ago on business resilience as it pertains to MSMEs. This was a bit coming out of COVID, and what it captured were a scope of the challenges that MSMEs have to deal with, and those 2 reports I could share with the committee after. But it really adds the context as to while the HR component might be one component within your organization, they also have to grapple with so many other things: macro forces in the economy, geopolitical forces, cybersecurity threats, and all of these things, what it results in, especially for medium and small enterprises, are resources being stretched thin. So even while intentions may be there, you have to manage with what you have. And that's a context we always need to, I think, take into consideration when we consider how do we define and how do we discuss the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We are mindful that we want to finish at around 12:15. So just one comment and then a question. With regards to the prior learning assessment and recognition, that was brought up at a previous inquiry, and it was cost prohibitive for a lot of the employees to access the certification pathway. And one suggestion was maybe that the employers could offset some of the costs, because it was very difficult for some of the employees to be able to pay to get certified. So that's just a comment that came up at an inquiry.
Well, I don't want to challenge Madam Chair, but I also was looking at it from the next side, which is the re-entry point. We spoke about the re-entry. That is, here are a number of youths who may have been around and moved from one place to the next, but they don't have certification. So it's difficult to apply. A new company is coming, looking for welders, but they can't apply. They can't say, well, I spent some, unless somebody give them a test. But I'm saying here might be an area for youths like that who are not part of the employ, who maybe as a strategy could get that kind of assessment and possibly recognition for the things that they have already achieved, and be able to go back now that they mature a lot more than when at age 15, 17, they're now serious. They could possibly go back. Because some of them went to school, have 2 or 3 O-levels, so it's not really that difficult to bring them back into the system. So I'm just thinking about that from a strategy point. I'm not debating at all the issue of fee.
No, not pay, the cost to access the certification.
Yes,
but yes, I think we're on the same page. That's a very good pathway for some people to get certification and therefore become employable. Did you want to add something, Ms. Walker?
Thanks, Chair. Just to add that, to be honest with you, I don't think a lot of the young persons are aware that that pathway exists. It's not something that naturally comes up in the education system if they attend. And I think that's an opportunity for that pathway to be part of the school leaving awareness. HUMAT has been involved in some of the school leaving preparation, interview skills, and so on. But I think that might also be a useful consideration. And to add, if there was an opportunity, I think, for walk-ins, right? So if you're not part of an organization, you may not be aware of that pathway, and you certainly can't access the pathway through an employer. But if they allowed walk-ins, people, as Mr. Derek was suggesting, who can just go into the institution and say, well, can I get an assessment of the skill that I have? And be able to get that certification. I don't know if that would be costly. I think that would go a great way in connecting that underemployed, unemployed person with a skill that hasn't been assessed as a pathway for employment?
Just one sec, because I'm just saying that the structure has to also be that the institutions have to be able to accept that for exemptions, especially from some of the practical courses that may be required at those institutions as an exemption for the follow-on for the certification.
Thank you. So just one final question to the Tobago House of Assembly regarding coordination with central government. So your submission states that the THA coordinates with central government and that the coordination on youth employment is primarily undertaken with the Ministry of Labour and the Ministry of Education. And you also refer to the OJT program and matching employment with the National Employment Service for job opportunities. So my question is, does the THA plan to have legislation or a standalone policy framework to deal specifically with youth unemployment and underemployment, linking with the central government?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. The THA has no legislative power, but in terms of its policy, the Executive Council is responsible for the formulation implementation of any policy that is relevant to youth the development. So as we roll out the strategic development planning pathway, we have a department of policy, plans, programs, and projects who will be charged with the responsibility to develop all the specific policies relevant to the various divisions of the Tobago House of Assembly. But with respect to the legislative authority, the level of autonomy that the THA needs to do that, we are not at that place as yet.
Okay, thank you, but you do collaborate with central government.
All the time we try to, in every aspect, as a means of getting in line with the national policy, as well as exploiting any opportunity for the advancement of the island and to benefit from the limited resources. We know we have a lot of limited resources here, to benefit from that kind of resource, that central government may have, that we can, tag along and benefit from.
Thank you. Did any other member have any questions to the representative bodies here today?
This is primarily for the THA, collaterally for who wants to answer. You mentioned before how much the private sector in Tobago was dependent on government policy and on your training of employees, potential employees. Has there been any financial funding from the private sector towards your programs and so? Since they're so dependent on you training employees for them?
It is not the case. The private sector in Tobago is not as strong as we want it to be. And because the THA
Even that one alone.
Okay.
I don't have any detail.
Yeah. Thank you. I think
the burden of driving the economy on the island.
Okay,
thank you. I think member Ameen had a question.
I know we are close to wrapping up. What I wanted for you to share, there is the issue of young people being aware of your services and how it could better equip them for the workplace. Can you summarize for the young people whom this might reach how an individual young person can access programs and tools that will make them more employable, just in general? Yeah?
Thank you, Member Ameen, Chair and members. So we are strong advocates for working in partnership with schools and the educational community in preparing persons for the world of work. HUMAT has been engaged in that process. So to the extent that people are connected to those communities, they will naturally hear about it. But I think we always have an opportunity, which is why we welcomed the establishment of our youth mentorship program that is certainly not reaching as many as we would like to, but it's a start. And I certainly, coming out of this, would advocate to our executive that we can perhaps consider some other pathways to reaching more youth and engaging in preparation for the world of work. But HUMAT is absolutely committed to continuing the work it's been doing with school programs, with educational communities like the University of the West Indies and others, and with employers in terms of partnering with them. Yeah, thank you.
Well, as I said, no,
Mr. Derek, you wanted to add something?
No, I thought I thought it was asked as a general question. I didn't realize it was.
Yes, it was. Did you want?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was saying that from the very start, we were saying that the structure of our organization, that we've been working more at the policy structural level. We will continue with that. We continue pushing. We believe that this is a big issue. The issue of youth unemployment. It is not a simple one, and I think we are willing. We have been participating as much as we've been invited to, and we have not only at the local level but at the international level, and we are willing to provide as much support as we could to assist with the transition. We think the school to work transition, if we create a very solid framework, that's a place I think that we could all find areas to support, and we will continue to encourage our members because we think they will significantly benefit from any of these structured training programs that provide persons ready for work.
And the THA, any comments? Please unmute your mic.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Now, the Division of Youth, we're very active on our social media pages. You could follow us on Facebook, Instagram. You could visit the website. Of course, Tobago is a very closely knit society. And we have persons on the field. We have our youth auxiliaries. We have our center coordinators on the field, linking with the organizations, the CBOs and the community groups. We're very active there. So you could just look out for them. They're always labeled in a youth t-shirt. Of course, we have a lot of community outreach initiatives. I could just walk up to any one of our officers and speak to us. We're very prevalent, very present, very visible. But of course, I like to end by saying that Tobago is a small society. Just about 50,000 of us here, and we all know everyone. So you know the Division of Youth, we're located right in Glen Road, Montessori, that building right there, Montessori Drive. So just come out and check us. We're on the first floor. Come out and check us, and we're always very willing and available to assist. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we probably have one final question from Member de Nobriga before we close.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to change direction a little bit. We have seen the impact of artificial intelligence and across sectors. My question to you is, are we seeing an impact on it in terms of entry-level jobs across sectors, firstly? And two, how is it changing the hiring practices amongst your organizations? Not only in terms of how many are being hired, but maybe the qualifications that you're also looking for.
Mindful of time, thank you, Member and Chair. We have not established a formal mechanism for getting that feedback, but there is active conversation among HR professionals about how work has changed, how it will change, and how we need to prepare for the future worker. And AI is big on the agenda in respect of, what we're looking at. So this shortest answer is no, we don't have that data, but it is something that we are actively engaged in discussion. And we have actually gone the route of preparing the HR professionals. So there is programming around AI and how it could support, and AI and how it can change. We are aware of some of those things. Employers are actively engaged in understanding if they can introduce AI into their organizations to impact on manpower, right? So we know that that is something that is on our doorstep. Some members have actively gone the distance and have started the processes, and we may have some fallout. I can't share with you at this time what that fallout could be. We just are aware that organizations are considering it. But it is not something that is formally polled at this point in time, but certainly engaging our attention.
Like Hilmad, we don't have any data to support the impact at this point. But we've had a number of our members raising issues or having questions and concerns. We've also been participating in some international fora discussing the whole issues of AI and ethics and something that our employers will be impacted by. We have recently participated in some consultations on the RSBA, the whole issue of the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act. We have been having some conversations about the whole issue of work from home and work from home policies, because I think that is a significant, I don't think that we've actually evaluated the impact of work from home and some of the legislation, especially some of the legislation now. Some of the recent judgments, like in Australia and stuff, on work from home. I think a lot of employers feel it's just simply say, okay, fine, you can stay home Monday and Tuesday, without looking at all the areas of impact. So from the legislative side, we've been seeing the concerns raised, and we've been doing a lot of those issues. But the fact is that the employers have to remain competitive. And if we don't adopt it, then the competitiveness level is going to fall. So we have to look at the whole balance. And our focus is really in terms of AI and the ethical adoption of AI. So that's where our focus has been. But we don't really have stats in terms of, and I don't think that the change has been significant, at least not yet.
We are still at our embryonic stage. How practical it is in transitioning us along our development pathway. So we are focused now on its integration, both at the planning, implementation stages, and at our performance measurement and evaluation of work done. So the Tobago House of Assembly has taken a bold step in engaging an advisor on digital transformation and AI, and working with a team in ensuring its integration in our workflow and our work processes to allow us to improve our delivery times and our service delivery time frames as we roll out our development priorities. So we see its importance, its practicability, but like the previous speaker, we also are engaged with ensuring that we have policy development and operating procedures that will take on board the AI in our programming and in our service delivery.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your contributions. I really want to thank all the officials of the various organizations for your attendance and contributions today, and also to all stakeholders who previously participated and contributed to this inquiry on youth unemployment and underemployment. And thanks also to committee members for your support and participation, and to the staff of the Office of the Parliament for your procedural and logistical support. I now declare this meeting adjourned.